Sarah Martinez had dreamed of this moment for 3 years. Standing at the gates of Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California, she felt the weight of every doubt, every discouraging comment, and every obstacle that had tried to keep her from this place. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training compound, and the sound of boots hitting pavement echoed in the distance. She wasn't supposed to be here. At least, that's what everyone had told her. Her recruitment officer had suggested administrative roles. Her family had questioned her decision. Even some of her fellow recruits had made it clear they didn't think she belonged. But Sarah had something that couldn't be measured in statistics or predicted by skeptics, an unbreakable determination that had carried her through every challenge life had thrown at her. The daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep their family afloat, Sarah had learned early that nothing came easy. Growing up in East Los Angeles, she had watched her neighborhood struggle with poverty, violence, and limited opportunities. While other kids complained about homework, Sarah was helping her younger brother with his studies after completing her own. While others played video games, she was working part-time jobs to help with family expenses. Her path to the Navy had begun in high school when a military recruiter visited her school. Unlike her classmates who seemed to drift without direction, Sarah felt an immediate connection to the idea of serving something larger than herself. The recruiter spoke about discipline, honor, and the opportunity to make a real difference in the world. But it was the challenge that truly captured her imagination, the idea that she could push herself beyond what anyone thought possible. After high school, Sarah had enlisted and quickly distinguished herself in basic training. Her instructors noted her exceptional physical fitness, sharp tactical thinking, and natural leadership abilities. More importantly, they observed something intangible, a refusal to quit that set her apart from her peers. When the opportunity arose to apply for special operations training, Sarah didn't hesitate. The application process had been grueling. Physical fitness tests that pushed her body to its limits. Psychological evaluations designed to probe for weaknesses. Background checks that examined every aspect of her life. Each stage eliminated candidates who had seemed invincible just weeks before. But Sarah had persevered, driven by a vision of herself as someone who could handle the impossible missions that others couldn't. Now, walking through the gates of the training facility, she carried with her the hopes and doubts of everyone who had shaped her journey. Her mother's worried phone calls. Her brother's proud but concerned expressions. Her former commanding officer's mix of encouragement and warnings about the road ahead. The training compound sprawled before her like a small city dedicated to creating warriors. Obstacle courses that looked like medieval torture devices. Swimming pools that would test every ounce of her aquatic skills. Classrooms where she would learn the technical aspects of special operations. And, everywhere, the instructors, men whose reputations preceded them, whose standards were legendary, and whose ability to break down even the strongest candidates was well documented. Sarah's first glimpse of her fellow candidates confirmed what she had expected: she was one of only 3 women in a class of 45. The other 2 women carried themselves with the same quiet confidence that she recognized in herself. They had undoubtedly faced the same skepticism, the same challenges, and the same internal drive that had brought them to this place. Marcus Thompson and Jennifer Walsh would become her closest allies in the weeks ahead, though none of them knew it yet. Marcus, a former college football player from Texas, had the kind of physical presence that made people assume he was all muscle and no brains. In reality, he possessed a mechanical engineering degree and had served with distinction in conventional Navy units before pursuing special operations. His easy smile and self-deprecating humor masked a fierce competitiveness that had driven him to excel in every challenge he had faced. Jennifer came from a military family where service was tradition, not choice. Her father had been a Marine, her grandfather a World War II veteran, and her uncles had served in various branches throughout the decades. Unlike Sarah and Marcus, who had to prove they belonged, Jennifer carried the weight of family expectations. She had excelled in every military school, earned top marks in every evaluation, and still felt like she had to justify her place among the elite. The 3 of them would soon discover that their different backgrounds and motivations would become their greatest strength. But, first, they had to survive the initial assessment that would determine who continued and who went home. Their first instructor was Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a man whose calm demeanor belied his reputation for pushing candidates beyond their breaking points. He had been through multiple deployments, seen combat in 3 different theaters, and had trained hundreds of special operations candidates over his career. His approach was methodical, calculated, and absolutely relentless. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rodriguez addressed the assembled candidates, his voice carrying easily across the formation without seeming to strain, "you are here because someone believes you have the potential to join the most elite fighting force in the world. Over the next several months, we will test that belief in ways you cannot imagine." Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she absorbed his words. This wasn't motivation or encouragement, it was a simple statement of fact delivered with the authority of someone who had seen countless hopefuls fail. "Some of you will leave because you are not physically capable of meeting our standards," Rodriguez continued. "Others will leave because you lack the mental toughness required for this profession. A few will leave because they realize they don't want this as much as they thought they did. And that's okay. There is no shame in discovering your limits. There is only shame in quitting when you still have more to give." The first week consisted of baseline assessments that would establish each candidate's starting point. Physical fitness tests that went far beyond anything Sarah had experienced in regular Navy training. Swimming events that tested not just speed and endurance, but comfort in the water under stress. Obstacle courses that required not just physical ability, but problem-solving skills and the courage to attempt seemingly impossible challenges. Sarah found herself constantly comparing her performance to her male counterparts, a habit she knew was counterproductive but couldn't seem to shake. When she completed the rope climb in the top 10% of the class, she wondered if the instructors were judging her differently. When she struggled with a particularly heavy carry event, she worried that she was confirming stereotypes about women in combat roles. It was Marcus who first helped her recognize the futility of this mental trap. After a particularly challenging day that had left several candidates questioning their commitment, he approached Sarah during evening chow. "You know what I figured out today?" he said, settling into the seat beside her with his meal tray. "I've been so worried about proving I'm not just some dumb jock that I forgot to focus on actually performing. Spent half the navigation course second-guessing myself instead of trusting my training." Sarah realized he was offering her something valuable, permission to stop fighting imaginary battles and focus on real ones. "I keep wondering if they're watching me differently because I'm a woman," she admitted. "They're watching all of us differently," Jennifer interjected, joining their conversation. "Rodriguez has been evaluating my family connections since day one. Wondering if I'm here because of my last name or because I earned it. The way I see it, we all have something to prove. The question is whether we prove it to them or to ourselves." This conversation marked the beginning of an alliance that would become crucial in the weeks ahead. While other candidates formed temporary partnerships based on convenience or comfort, Sarah, Marcus, and Jennifer developed something deeper, a mutual recognition of shared purpose and complementary strengths. Sarah's analytical approach to problems balanced Marcus's intuitive physical abilities. Jennifer's technical knowledge supported both of their weaker areas. More importantly, they learned to rely on each other's emotional support during the inevitable low points that tested every candidate's resolve. The instructors noticed this developing partnership with interest. In special operations, the ability to function as part of a cohesive unit was just as important as individual excellence. Teams that worked well together accomplished missions that defeated even superior individual performers. As the first month progressed, the training intensified in ways that challenged not just physical capabilities, but mental resilience. Sleep deprivation became a constant factor. Meal times became irregular and insufficient. The margin for error in every exercise decreased steadily. Sarah discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known existed. When exhaustion made her legs feel like lead weights, she found ways to keep moving. When hunger made it difficult to think clearly, she learned to focus on the essential elements of each task. When cold water made her body shake uncontrollably, she developed mental techniques to maintain her performance standards. But it was the psychological pressure that proved most challenging. The instructors seemed to possess an uncanny ability to identify each candidate's specific vulnerabilities and apply pressure precisely where it would be most effective. For some, this meant public criticism of their performance. For others, it meant questioning their motivation or commitment. Sarah's vulnerability was her sense of responsibility for representing all women in special operations. When an instructor suggested that her presence was a distraction to male candidates, she felt the weight of every woman who might follow in her footsteps. When another instructor questioned whether she was strong enough to carry a wounded teammate, she heard echoes of every person who had ever doubted her capabilities. The key breakthrough came during a particularly brutal week of training that combined sleep deprivation, intense physical challenges, and constant evaluation. Sarah had been struggling with a rope traverse exercise that required upper body strength she was still developing. After multiple failed attempts, she could feel the frustration and embarrassment building to a breaking point. Instead of trying again immediately, she stepped back and observed other candidates tackling the same obstacle. She noticed that the successful approaches relied more on technique and timing than pure strength. When she attempted the traverse again, she applied these observations and completed it successfully. The instructor who had been evaluating her performance nodded approvingly. "Good adaptation, Martinez. That's what we're looking for, the ability to learn and improve under pressure." This moment crystallized something important for Sarah. The instructors weren't trying to break her down because they wanted her to fail. They were testing her ability to maintain performance standards and continue learning even when everything was working against her. It was a realization that shifted her entire approach to the training. Instead of viewing each challenge as a test of her worthiness, she began to see them as opportunities to develop capabilities she would need in real-world operations. Instead of worrying about how her performance compared to others, she focused on improving her own abilities and supporting her teammates when they needed help. This mental shift coincided with a physical adaptation that surprised even Sarah herself. Weeks of intense training had transformed her body in ways that regular exercise never had. Her endurance had increased dramatically. Her strength had improved across every measure. Most importantly, her confidence in her physical capabilities had grown to match her mental determination. The other candidates began to notice this transformation as well. Where they had initially seen Sarah as an unknown quantity, they now recognized her as a reliable teammate who could be counted on to maintain standards and contribute to team success. The respect was hard-earned and genuine. As the first phase of training neared its conclusion, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that first day at the gates. She had discovered capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. She had developed relationships that felt more like family than friendships. Most importantly, she had proven to herself that she belonged here not because of politics or quotas, but because she had the skills and determination to meet the standards. The real tests were still ahead. Advanced training phases that would push every candidate to their absolute limits. Specialized skills that would require months to master. And, eventually, if she made it that far, real-world missions where the stakes would be measured in lives rather than training scores. But, as Sarah prepared for the next phase of her journey, she carried with her something that couldn't be taught or trained, the unshakable knowledge that she had already overcome her biggest obstacle. Not the physical challenges or the skeptical instructors or the grueling schedule, but her own doubts about whether she truly belonged among the elite warriors she had dreamed of joining. The young woman who had stood at the gates weeks earlier had been driven by determination and hope. The candidate who now prepared for advanced training was powered by proven capability and earned confidence. The transformation was visible to everyone around her, but, most importantly, it was real to Sarah herself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to fail or succeed, and new chances to prove that excellence wasn't defined by gender or background, but by the willingness to pursue perfection regardless of the cost. Sarah Martinez was ready for whatever came next. The second phase of training arrived like a storm that had been building on the horizon for weeks. Where the first month had been about establishing baselines and weeding out candidates who lacked basic qualifications, the next stage would test the limits of human endurance and mental toughness. Sarah Martinez and her remaining classmates were about to enter what the instructors called the Crucible, a period designed to break down even the strongest candidates and rebuild them into something harder. Of the original 45 candidates, 31 remained. Each person who had left represented a different type of failure, some physical, some mental, some simply a recognition that this path wasn't for them. The survivors looked at each other with a mixture of pride and apprehension, knowing that the hardest tests were still ahead. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez had been replaced by a new cadre of instructors, each bringing specialized expertise and a reputation for pushing candidates beyond what they thought possible. The lead instructor was Master Chief Sullivan, a man whose mere presence seemed to command respect from everyone around him. He had spent 25 years in special operations, earned decorations from 3 different conflicts, and trained some of the most elite warriors currently serving. Sullivan's approach differed markedly from Rodriguez's methodical style. Where Rodriguez had been analytical and measured, Sullivan was unpredictable and intense. He seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to appear exactly where candidates were struggling most, offering either crucial guidance or devastating criticism depending on what he judged they needed most. The first month was about determining whether you have the basic qualifications to be here. Sullivan addressed the assembled candidates on their first morning of advanced training. The next phase will determine whether you have what it takes to operate at the highest levels of warfare. The difference between those two standards is larger than most of you can imagine. Sarah felt the familiar flutter of nervous energy that preceded major challenges. She had grown more confident in her abilities over the past month, but Sullivan's words reminded her that everything up to this point had been preparation for the real testing that was about to begin. The physical demands increased immediately and dramatically. Where previous training days had lasted 8 to 10 hours, the new schedule extended to 12 or 14 hours of continuous activity. Sleep became a luxury rationed in 4-hour blocks when candidates were fortunate, 2-hour intervals when they weren't. Meals were consumed standing up between exercises, and even basic hygiene became a privilege that had to be earned through performance. Sarah discovered that the mental challenges were even more demanding than the physical ones. Complex navigation exercises that required maintaining accuracy while exhausted. Technical skills training that demanded perfect execution while under extreme time pressure. Tactical scenarios that tested decision-making abilities when every choice carried potentially fatal consequences. It was during this period that Sarah, Marcus, and Jennifer's alliance became truly crucial. They developed an informal system of mutual support that helped all 3 maintain their performance when individual reserves were depleted. When Sarah struggled with a particularly complex technical procedure, Jennifer's patient explanation helped her master it. When Marcus hit a wall during an endurance event, Sarah's steady encouragement kept him moving. When Jennifer doubted her tactical decision-making, Marcus's confidence in her abilities helped restore her self-assurance. The instructors watched these developing partnerships with keen interest. In real-world operations, the ability to function as an integrated team often meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Candidates who learned to genuinely rely on each other while maintaining their individual excellence were demonstrating exactly the kind of judgment that special operations required. But the instructors also understood that this support system needed to be tested under extreme conditions. It was one thing to help a teammate during routine training exercises. It would be quite another to maintain that same loyalty and effectiveness when personal survival was at stake. The test came during what the instructors called Hell Week, 7 days of virtually continuous training designed to simulate the exhaustion, stress, and confusion of extended combat operations. Candidates would be pushed to the absolute limits of their physical and mental capabilities. Those who survived would have proven their ability to function effectively even under the worst possible conditions. Hell Week began at midnight on a Sunday with what appeared to be a routine assembly. The candidates had been given no warning, no opportunity to prepare mentally or physically. Sullivan simply appeared in their barracks and announced that the next phase of training was beginning immediately. "You have 5 minutes to be on the beach in full gear," he announced. "Anyone who is late will be automatically removed from the program." The scramble that followed tested not just individual speed and preparation, but each candidate's ability to help teammates while taking care of their own requirements. Sarah found herself helping a struggling classmate with his equipment while ensuring her own gear was properly secured. It was exactly the kind of split-second decision-making that would define the entire week. The beach assembly revealed the first major challenge, a series of boat crews that would be responsible for transporting heavy rubber boats through various exercises. Each crew consisted of 6 candidates who would have to function as a perfectly coordinated unit. Failure by any individual would result in punishment for the entire crew. Sarah found herself assigned to a boat crew with Marcus, Jennifer, and 3 other candidates she knew less well. The dynamic was immediately complicated by the fact that one crew member, Davidson, had made no secret of his belief that women didn't belong in special operations. Another, Phillips, was clearly struggling with the physical demands of training and seemed likely to become a weak link. The first exercise was deceptively simple: transport the boats from the beach to a point several miles down the coast, then return. The boats weighed several hundred pounds and required perfect coordination to move efficiently. In calm conditions with rested crews, it would have been challenging but manageable. In the middle of the night with candidates who were already operating on minimal sleep, it became a test of will as much as skill. Sarah's crew started strong, with Marcus and Jennifer providing powerful lifting capability while Sarah coordinated their movements. But, as the hours passed and exhaustion set in, cracks began to appear in their teamwork. Davidson's resentment began to manifest as subtle non-cooperation that made every task more difficult. Phillips struggled to maintain his share of the load, forcing others to compensate. It was during the return journey that the situation reached a breaking point. Phillips stumbled while navigating a rocky section of beach, causing the entire crew to lose control of their boat. The massive rubber craft crashed down, barely missing several crew members and causing damage that would slow their progress for the remainder of the exercise. Davidson erupted in anger, directing his frustration at both Phillips and the women on the crew. "This is exactly why women don't belong here," he shouted, his voice carrying clearly in the night air. "When the going gets tough, they become liabilities." Sarah felt the familiar surge of anger that had driven her to prove herself throughout her military career. Every instinct told her to respond, to defend herself and Jennifer, to show Davidson exactly how wrong he was. But something else, perhaps wisdom gained through months of training, made her pause and consider the bigger picture. Instead of engaging in an argument that would solve nothing and might damage crew cohesion further, Sarah focused on the mission. "We can discuss crew dynamics later," she said firmly. "Right now, we need to complete this exercise. Phillips, are you injured?" When Phillips confirmed he was uninjured but clearly shaken, Sarah made a quick decision. "Marcus and Jennifer, take the lead positions. Davidson and I will take the middle. Phillips, you coordinate from the back and call out obstacles. We adjust our technique to work with what we have, not waste energy fighting about what we don't have." The reorganization worked. By adapting their approach to accommodate Phillips's limitations while maximizing everyone else's strengths, the crew managed to complete the exercise within the required time parameters. More importantly, they had demonstrated the kind of adaptive problem-solving that the instructors were looking for. Master Chief Sullivan had been observing from a distance, and his evaluation later made it clear that Sarah's leadership during the crisis had been noted and appreciated. "Martinez made the right call," he told the assembled instructors. "She prioritized mission accomplishment over personal grievances. That's exactly the kind of judgment we need in the field." But Hell Week was far from over. The boat exercise was followed by a series of increasingly challenging events designed to test every aspect of the candidates' preparation. Swimming events in rough water that tested not just physical capability but courage. Obstacle courses that had to be completed while carrying heavy loads. Combat scenarios that required split-second tactical decisions under extreme stress. Through it all, Sarah found herself drawing on reserves of strength and determination she hadn't known existed. When her body screamed for rest, she found ways to keep moving. When her mind became cloudy with exhaustion, she developed techniques for maintaining focus on essential tasks. When despair threatened to overwhelm her, she remembered why she was here and what she was trying to achieve. The support system she had developed with Marcus and Jennifer proved invaluable, but it also evolved in ways that surprised all 3 of them. They learned to communicate without words, reading each other's condition and needs through subtle cues. When one person was struggling, the others automatically adjusted to provide additional support. When someone was performing well, they took on extra responsibility to help the team succeed. By the third day of Hell Week, their crew had emerged as one of the strongest performing units in the class. Other candidates began to notice their effectiveness, and some of the initial skepticism about women in special operations training began to give way to grudging respect. Even Davidson, who remained personally hostile, couldn't deny the contribution that Sarah and Jennifer were making to their crew's success. The fourth day brought what many candidates later described as the most challenging event of their entire training experience. Each crew was required to complete a series of tasks while maintaining continuous movement for 18 hours. The tasks included navigation exercises, equipment maintenance, tactical planning, and physical challenges that had to be executed flawlessly despite mounting exhaustion. Sarah's crew began the exercise with confidence built from their previous successes. But, as the hours accumulated and fatigue deepened, even their strong teamwork began to show strain. Simple tasks that would normally take minutes stretched into quarter-hour ordeals. Communication became more difficult as everyone's mental clarity decreased. It was during this period that Sarah experienced what she later recognized as a crucial moment in her development as a special operations candidate. Around the 14-hour mark, with 4 hours still remaining, she felt herself reaching what seemed like absolute exhaustion. Every muscle in her body ached. Her mind felt wrapped in fog. The temptation to simply stop moving and accept failure was overwhelming. But, instead of giving in to that temptation, Sarah made a conscious decision to push through the barrier. She focused on the immediate task at hand rather than the hours that remained. She drew strength from her teammates' continued efforts. Most importantly, she reminded herself that this moment, when everything seemed impossible, was exactly when special operations personnel proved their worth. The breakthrough was both physical and mental. Once she pushed past that initial wall of exhaustion, Sarah discovered that her body had additional reserves available. Her mind cleared enough to continue making good decisions. Most significantly, she realized that her previous understanding of her own limitations had been unnecessarily restrictive. This realization came at a perfect time, because the final hours of the exercise brought unexpected challenges that tested every crew's adaptability. Weather conditions deteriorated, making previously straightforward tasks significantly more difficult. Equipment failures required creative problem-solving under time pressure. Navigation became more complex as visibility decreased. Sarah's crew not only completed all required tasks within the time limit, but did so while maintaining the kind of performance standards that impressed even the veteran instructors. Their success wasn't just about individual capabilities, it represented the kind of seamless teamwork that made elite units effective in real-world operations. The fifth day of Hell Week shifted focus to individual challenges designed to test each candidate's personal limits. After days of crew-based exercises, candidates suddenly found themselves isolated and forced to rely entirely on their own resources. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Sarah had become accustomed to the support and encouragement of her teammates. Suddenly, facing challenges alone, she initially felt vulnerable and uncertain. But she quickly realized that the confidence and capability she had developed over months of training were genuinely her own, not dependent on external support. The individual challenges were designed to be barely possible for even the strongest candidates. Swimming events that pushed endurance to absolute limits. Carrying tasks that required near maximum strength output. Technical exercises that demanded perfect execution while mentally and physically exhausted. Sarah approached each challenge with the methodical determination that had become her trademark. She broke complex tasks into manageable components. She paced herself carefully to avoid burnout while maintaining required performance standards. Most importantly, she refused to allow temporary setbacks to undermine her overall confidence. By the end of the fifth day, Sarah had not only completed every required task but had done so with a level of performance that placed her among the top candidates in the class. The girl who had wondered whether she belonged in special operations training had become a woman who was proving she could excel at the highest levels of military performance. The final 2 days of Hell Week brought a return to crew-based exercises, but with an important difference. The surviving candidates had been tested individually and as team members. Now they were being evaluated on their ability to integrate both sets of skills seamlessly. Sarah's reunion with Marcus and Jennifer felt like reconnecting with family after a long separation. The bond between them had been strengthened by their individual successes and their shared understanding of what they had each overcome. But they also brought back enhanced individual capabilities that made their teamwork even more effective. The final exercise of Hell Week was both symbolic and practical, a simulated mission that required every skill they had developed over months of training. Navigation, combat tactics, technical procedures, physical challenges, and decision-making under pressure were all integrated into a single comprehensive test. Sarah's crew approached the final challenge with quiet confidence earned through weeks of proven performance. They executed their assigned tasks with the kind of precision that marked truly elite units. More importantly, they demonstrated the adaptability and mutual support that would be essential in real-world operations. When Hell Week finally ended, 23 candidates remained from the original 45. Each survivor had proven their ability to function effectively under the most extreme conditions their instructors could create. They had discovered capabilities they hadn't known they possessed and had earned the right to continue pursuing their goal of joining the special operations community. For Sarah Martinez, Hell Week represented more than just another phase of training. It was confirmation that her childhood dreams of serving at the highest levels weren't just fantasies, they were achievable goals that she was actively pursuing with skill and determination. The young woman who had once wondered if she belonged among warriors had become someone who was proving she could lead them. The weeks following Hell Week brought a deceptive sense of relief to the surviving candidates. Having endured what many considered the ultimate test of their capabilities, Sarah Martinez and her classmates entered the specialized training phase with hard-earned confidence. They had proven they could function under extreme conditions, work as cohesive teams, and maintain performance standards when everything was working against them. But Master Chief Sullivan and his team of instructors knew something the candidates didn't yet understand. The most dangerous moment in any elite training program came not during the obvious challenges, but in the quiet periods when students began to believe they had already proven themselves. Complacency was a luxury that special operations personnel could never afford, and the instructors were determined to ensure that lesson was learned permanently. The specialized training phase began with what appeared to be a routine introduction to advanced tactical skills. Small unit tactics, close quarters combat, advanced marksmanship, and specialized equipment familiarization. The pace was demanding but manageable compared to the intensity of Hell Week. For the first time in months, candidates were getting adequate sleep, regular meals, and time for proper equipment maintenance. Sarah found herself thriving in this environment. The technical aspects of special operations appealed to her analytical mind, while the tactical challenges engaged her competitive instincts. She excelled in marksmanship training, showing natural aptitude for precision shooting under various conditions. Her performance in close-quarters combat was equally impressive, combining her improved physical capabilities with strategic thinking that often surprised her opponents. Marcus continued to demonstrate the mechanical aptitude that had made him valuable throughout training. When equipment malfunctioned or modifications were needed, he became the unofficial problem solver for their training group. His easygoing personality made him popular with instructors and fellow candidates alike, but his performance remained consistently excellent across all skill areas. Jennifer's family military background proved invaluable during the tactical training phases. She possessed an intuitive understanding of military planning and execution that helped her excel in leadership exercises. Her ability to coordinate complex operations while maintaining attention to critical details made her a natural choice when instructors needed someone to take charge of training scenarios. The three had maintained their strong partnership through all the previous challenges, and they naturally assumed it would continue to serve them well in the specialized training phase. They developed informal study groups for technical subjects, practiced advanced skills together during off-duty hours, and continued to provide mutual support during particularly challenging exercises. But the instructors had been observing their partnership with growing concern. While teamwork was essential in special operations, overdependence on specific individuals could become a critical vulnerability in real-world missions. Elite warriors needed to be able to function effectively with any team composition, under any circumstances, even if their preferred partners were unavailable. The test came during what the instructors called Knife Skills Week, a period dedicated to close-quarters combat training with various blade weapons. The training was both practical and symbolic. Practically, knife combat skills were essential for special operations personnel who might find themselves in situations where firearms were unavailable or inappropriate. Symbolically, blade work required the kind of personal courage and mental toughness that characterized elite warriors throughout history. The week began with basic techniques, proper grip, stance, movement patterns, and defensive positions. Sarah initially struggled with the aggressive mindset required for effective knife fighting. Her natural inclination toward analytical problem-solving served her well in most aspects of training, but blade combat required a more primitive, instinctual response that took time to develop. The instruction was led by Chief Warrant Officer Kane, a man whose reputation for knife fighting bordered on legendary. Kane had spent 15 years in special operations, earning decorations for valor in multiple combat deployments. His expertise with edged weapons was genuine and hard-earned, developed through training and actual combat experience. Kane's teaching methods were as intense as his reputation suggested. He believed that knife fighting could only be learned through realistic training that simulated actual combat conditions. Students practiced with training weapons that could cause pain but not permanent injury. The psychological pressure was real, the physical contact was meaningful, and the consequences of poor technique were immediately apparent. Knife fighting isn't a sport, Kane explained to the assembled candidates. There are no rules, no referees, and no second-place winners. You either develop the skills to survive these encounters, or you become a casualty. I'm here to make sure you develop the right skills. Sarah found Kane's approach initially overwhelming. The aggressive, close-contact nature of knife combat was unlike anything in her previous training experience. Where marksmanship required controlled precision and tactical exercises demanded careful planning, blade work required an immediate, violent response to perceived threats. Her first few training sessions were frustrating exercises in learning to overcome her natural reluctance to engage in close combat. Kane was relentless in his criticism of her hesitation, pointing out that indecision in knife fighting was inevitably fatal. "Martinez, your enemy isn't going to wait for you to think through your options," he would say after she hesitated during a drill. "You need to react instantly and aggressively, or you're dead." The breakthrough came during a particularly intense training session when Kane paired Sarah with Davidson, the candidate who had been hostile toward women in the program since the beginning. Davidson saw the knife training as an opportunity to demonstrate his physical superiority and approached each drill with obvious enthusiasm for the chance to dominate his female opponent. Initially, Davidson's greater size and strength gave him significant advantages in their training bouts. He was able to control the distance and timing of their encounters, leaving Sarah constantly reacting to his initiatives rather than implementing her own techniques. Kane observed these early sessions without comment, but Sarah could sense his evaluation of her performance was not positive. The turning point came when Sarah stopped trying to match Davidson's aggressive style and instead began to use her own natural advantages. Her smaller size actually made her a more difficult target to engage effectively. Her analytical mind allowed her to identify patterns in Davidson's attacks and prepare appropriate responses. Most importantly, she learned to channel her frustration with his attitude into the kind of controlled aggression that Kane was trying to teach. During one memorable training session, Davidson attempted to overwhelm Sarah with a particularly aggressive combination of attacks. Instead of backing away as she had in previous encounters, Sarah used his momentum against him, redirecting his energy and creating an opening for a counterattack that would have been decisive in actual combat. Kane's approving nod was the first positive feedback she had received in knife training. "That's what I'm looking for, Martinez," Kane said after the session. "You stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a predator. That's the mindset you need to survive." From that point forward, Sarah's knife fighting skills improved dramatically. She developed her own style that emphasized speed, precision, and psychological warfare rather than brute force. Her ability to remain calm under pressure, combined with her growing technical proficiency, made her one of the most effective knife fighters in the class. But the real test was still ahead. The culminating exercise for Knife Skills Week was a comprehensive evaluation that would test not just technical proficiency, but the ability to maintain performance under extreme stress. Each candidate would face multiple opponents in rapid succession, using training weapons that would leave very real bruises and cuts as evidence of poor performance. The evaluation took place in a specialized training facility designed to simulate the confined, chaotic conditions where knife combat typically occurred. Poor lighting, obstacles that limited movement, and background noise that made communication difficult all contributed to an environment that tested every aspect of the student's preparation. Sarah approached the evaluation with nervous confidence. Her technical skills had improved dramatically over the week, and she felt prepared for the physical challenges ahead. But she also understood that this test was about more than just fighting ability. It was about demonstrating the kind of mental toughness that would be required in real combat situations. Her first opponent was Phillips, the candidate who had struggled during Hell Week but had managed to survive and improve his performance in subsequent training. Phillips was determined to prove that his earlier difficulties didn't define his capabilities, and he approached the bout with visible intensity. The encounter was brief but decisive. Phillips attempted to use his recent improvement in confidence to overcome his continued disadvantage in technical skills. Sarah recognized his strategy immediately and used his overaggression against him, ending the bout quickly with a combination that demonstrated both her technical proficiency and her tactical thinking. Her second opponent was Marcus, and this encounter presented completely different challenges. Marcus knew her fighting style intimately from weeks of training together. He understood her preferred techniques and had observed her strategic thinking throughout their partnership. But Sarah had also learned from watching Marcus train, and she knew his tendencies just as well as he knew hers. The bout between Sarah and Marcus became a chess match played at knife fighting speed. Each of them anticipated the other's moves and prepared appropriate counters. The technical proficiency displayed by both candidates impressed the observing instructors, but what really caught their attention was the mutual respect and sportsmanship they maintained even while engaged in aggressive combat training. When Sarah finally gained a decisive advantage, she executed her finishing technique with just enough force to demonstrate effectiveness while avoiding unnecessary damage to her training partner. Marcus acknowledged her victory with genuine appreciation for her skill rather than resentment at his loss. Their interaction demonstrated the kind of professional attitude that the instructors wanted to see in all candidates. Sarah's third and final opponent was Jennifer, and this matchup created the most complex emotional dynamics of the evaluation. The three women in the program had supported each other throughout the training, but now they were required to engage in direct combat that would clearly establish one as superior to the other. The psychological pressure was intense for both women. They were acutely aware that their performance would be scrutinized not just as individual candidates, but as representatives of women in special operations training. A poor showing by either of them would likely be used as evidence that women weren't suited for this type of combat role. The bout itself was technically excellent and tactically sophisticated. Both women demonstrated the advanced skills they had developed over the training week. Jennifer's family military background gave her natural tactical instincts, while Sarah's analytical approach allowed her to identify and exploit small advantages as they developed. The decisive moment came when Jennifer attempted a complex attack that required perfect timing to execute successfully. Sarah recognized the technique from their training sessions and was prepared with an appropriate counter. Her response was flawless in execution and devastating in effect, ending the bout conclusively in her favor. Chief Warrant Officer Kane's evaluation of Sarah's performance was unequivocal. Martinez demonstrated advanced technical skills, sound tactical thinking, and appropriate aggressive mindset throughout the evaluation, he announced to the assembled candidates. Her performance represents the standard we expect from special operations personnel. But Kane wasn't finished with his assessment. He had observed something during the evaluations that concerned him, and he intended to address it immediately. The close partnership between Sarah, Marcus, and Jennifer had been beneficial during many aspects of their training, but it was also creating dependencies that could become problematic in real-world operations. "I need Martinez, Thompson, and Walsh to remain after the session," Kane announced. "Everyone else is dismissed for evening chow." When the three candidates stood before him, Kane's expression was serious rather than congratulatory. "You three have demonstrated excellent individual performance throughout training," he began. Your technical skills are solid, your physical preparation is outstanding, and your determination is unquestionable. But you've also developed a partnership that may be limiting your individual development. Sarah felt a chill of apprehension as Kane continued his assessment. In real-world operations, you won't have the luxury of choosing your team members. You need to be able to function effectively with any personnel assignment, under any circumstances. Your current partnership, while beneficial in many ways, has created dependencies that could become vulnerabilities. The implications of Kane's words were immediately clear to all three candidates. They had become so comfortable working together that they might not be developing the independence and adaptability that special operations required. Their mutual support system, which had been crucial during Hell Week and other challenges, might actually be hampering their growth as individual warriors. Starting tomorrow, you will be assigned to different training groups for the remainder of specialized skills training, Kane announced. You will continue to live in the same barracks and interact during off-duty hours, but your professional training will be conducted separately. We need to see how each of you performs when you can't rely on your established support system. The separation was more difficult than any of them had anticipated. After months of facing every challenge together, suddenly, being isolated from their closest allies felt like losing essential equipment before a critical mission. Sarah found herself second-guessing decisions that she would have made confidently with Marcus and Jennifer nearby to provide backup and support. Her new training group consisted of candidates she knew less well, including Davidson and several others who had never fully accepted women in the program. The dynamic was immediately different and more challenging. Where her previous group had operated with established trust and mutual support, this new arrangement required her to prove herself all over again with teammates who were more skeptical of her capabilities. The first major challenge came during a complex tactical exercise that required coordinated team movement through enemy territory. Sarah was assigned as the team leader, responsible for planning and executing a mission that would test every aspect of their training to date. The mission briefing revealed a scenario that was both realistic and challenging. Her team would need to penetrate enemy defenses, gather specific intelligence, and extract without being detected. Failure at any stage would result in mission failure and potential catastrophic consequences for the simulated operation. Sarah approached the planning phase with the same methodical analysis that had served her well throughout training. She studied the terrain, evaluated her team members' individual capabilities, and developed a comprehensive plan that maximized their chances of success while minimizing unnecessary risks. But executing the plan with an unfamiliar team proved more difficult than she had anticipated. Davidson questioned several of her tactical decisions, suggesting alternatives that would have been more aggressive but less likely to succeed. Other team members seemed to hesitate when following her instructions, apparently waiting for confirmation from male team members before proceeding. The mission began to unravel during the infiltration phase when Davidson ignored Sarah's explicit instructions about maintaining radio silence. His unauthorized communication was detected by the opposing force, compromising the team's position and forcing them to abort their primary approach route. Sarah was faced with a critical decision. She could stick to her original plan despite the changed circumstances, modify the plan to account for the new tactical situation, or abort the mission entirely to avoid further complications. Each option carried significant risks and potential consequences. Instead of panicking or deferring to other team members, Sarah made a decisive command decision. She modified the mission plan in real time, adapting to the new tactical situation while maintaining focus on the primary objective. Her revised approach was more aggressive than her original plan, but it offered the best chance of mission success given the changed circumstances. The modified plan worked. Sarah's team successfully gathered the required intelligence and extracted without further compromise. More importantly, her leadership during the crisis had demonstrated exactly the kind of adaptability and decisiveness that the instructors were looking for in future special operations personnel. Kane's evaluation of the mission was comprehensive and positive. Martinez demonstrated sound tactical planning, effective leadership under pressure, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, he announced to the assembled candidates. Her performance during this exercise represents the standard we expect from team leaders in special operations units. But, for Sarah, the real victory was personal rather than professional. She had proven to herself that her capabilities weren't dependent on any specific support system. The confidence and skills she had developed were genuinely her own, available when needed regardless of the team composition or circumstances. The separation from Marcus and Jennifer continued for several more weeks, during which each of them faced similar challenges and achieved similar breakthroughs. When they were finally reunited for advanced training phases, their relationship had evolved from mutual dependence to genuine mutual respect based on proven individual capabilities. Their partnership was stronger than ever, but it was no longer essential for any of their individual success. They had become truly elite candidates not just because they could work well together, but because each of them could excel independently when circumstances required it. The knife skills evaluation had been about more than just combat proficiency. It had been a test of their individual character, their ability to adapt under pressure, and their readiness to assume the responsibilities that came with elite military service. All three had passed that test, but the real challenges were still ahead. The final phase of training arrived with the weight of everything that had come before. Sarah Martinez stood at the threshold of achieving her ultimate goal, graduating from the most challenging military training program in the world and earning the right to serve among the elite warriors she had dreamed of joining since childhood. But the path to that achievement would require her to face the most demanding test yet devised by the veteran instructors who had been evaluating her for months. Master Chief Sullivan had been observing Sarah's progression through every phase of training. He had watched her overcome initial self-doubt, develop unshakable confidence, master technical skills that challenged even the most capable candidates, and demonstrate leadership abilities that impressed seasoned combat veterans. But he also knew that the ultimate test of any special operations candidate came not in training exercises, but in moments that revealed their deepest character. The final evaluation exercise was designed to create exactly such moments. Unlike previous training scenarios that tested specific skills or capabilities, this exercise would place candidates in situations where they had to choose between personal success and team welfare, between following orders and doing what they believed was right, between their own safety and their commitment to the mission. The scenario briefing took place in a secure facility that Sarah had never seen before. The room was set up like a real operational planning center, complete with detailed maps, intelligence briefings, and communication equipment. The atmosphere was deliberately serious and professional, designed to help candidates understand that this was no longer training, it was as close to real combat operations as could be safely simulated. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sullivan began, his voice carrying the authority of 2 decades in special operations, "you are about to participate in your final evaluation. This exercise will test everything you have learned over the past months, but, more importantly, it will reveal whether you possess the judgment and character required for this profession." The mission briefing revealed a complex scenario that required multiple teams to coordinate their actions across a large operational area. Sarah's team was assigned to capture a high-value target while other teams provided diversionary actions and support. The exercise would unfold over 48 hours in realistic terrain, using actual military equipment and live-fire training munitions. Sarah found herself leading a 6-person team that included Marcus, Jennifer, Davidson, Phillips, and Rodriguez, a candidate she knew less well but who had consistently demonstrated solid performance throughout training. The team composition was clearly deliberate, combining her closest allies with individuals who had challenged her leadership in various ways throughout the training process. The initial planning phase went smoothly. Sarah's analytical approach to tactical problems had been refined through months of training, and she quickly developed a comprehensive plan that maximized their chances of mission success. Her team members contributed their specialized knowledge and expertise, creating a coordinated approach that accounted for multiple contingencies. But Sullivan and his team of evaluators had built complications into the scenario that wouldn't become apparent until the exercise was underway. The candidates would face equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and changing tactical situations that would test their ability to adapt under pressure. More critically, they would encounter moral and ethical dilemmas that had no clear right answers. The exercise began before dawn with insertion into the operational area via helicopter. The flight itself was part of the evaluation, testing each candidate's ability to maintain focus and preparation despite the disorientation and anxiety that came with night helicopter operations. Sarah used the flight time to review mission details and mentally rehearse critical decision points, but she also found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The young woman who had stood at the training facility gates months earlier had been driven primarily by determination and hope. The candidate who now prepared for her final evaluation possessed proven capabilities, hard-earned confidence, and, most importantly, a clear understanding of what it meant to serve at the highest levels of military excellence. The insertion went perfectly, with all teams reaching their designated positions without detection. Sarah's team moved through the initial phases of their mission plan with the kind of precision that marked truly professional military units. Each team member understood their role completely and executed their assignments with the competence that had been developed through months of intensive training. The first complication arose during the approach to the target area. Sarah's team encountered an unexpected enemy patrol that wasn't included in the original intelligence briefing. The patrol's position blocked their planned route and forced them to choose between engaging the enemy and compromising their mission, or finding an alternative approach that would delay their timeline and potentially affect other teams' operations. Sarah made the tactical decision to avoid contact and seek an alternative route. The choice demonstrated sound judgment and adherence to special operations principles that emphasized mission accomplishment over engagement with secondary targets. But it also meant accepting additional risk and complexity that would test her team's adaptability under pressure. The alternative route required movement through terrain that was more difficult and potentially more dangerous than their original plan. Rocky ground that could cause injury if navigated carelessly. Dense vegetation that limited visibility and communication. Creek crossings that could leave them vulnerable to detection if not executed properly. It was during one of these creek crossings that the exercise took a dangerous turn. Phillips, who had struggled with confidence issues throughout training, slipped on wet rocks and suffered what appeared to be a serious ankle injury. The sound of his fall and subsequent cry of pain potentially compromised their position, and his injury clearly limited his ability to continue with the mission. Sarah faced the kind of decision that had no perfect solution. She could abort the mission to ensure Phillips received proper medical attention, but this would mean failing the exercise and potentially affecting her entire team's evaluation. She could continue the mission and leave Phillips behind, but this violated fundamental principles about never abandoning team members. Or she could modify the mission plan to account for his injury, accepting additional risk and complexity. The decision was made more complicated by Phillips' own insistence that he could continue despite obvious pain and limited mobility. "I'm not going to be the reason this team fails," he said through gritted teeth. "Just give me a few minutes to adjust, and I'll keep up." Sarah's response revealed the kind of character that Sullivan and his team were evaluating. Instead of making a quick decision based on mission requirements or personal considerations, she took time to properly assess the situation. She examined Phillips' injury personally, evaluated the tactical implications of each option, and, most importantly, considered what course of action would be most consistent with the values and principles that special operations personnel were expected to uphold. "We're not leaving anyone behind," she announced to her team. "But we're also not continuing this mission if it means putting someone in danger they can't handle. Phillips, I need an honest assessment of your capabilities, not what you think I want to hear." After a frank discussion about his limitations and the team's ability to compensate, Sarah made the decision to continue the mission with modifications that would account for Phillips' reduced mobility. The choice required her to trust her team members to handle additional responsibilities while accepting increased personal risk as team leader. The modified mission plan worked, but it required every team member to perform at the absolute peak of their capabilities. Marcus took on additional responsibilities for heavy equipment and technical tasks. Jennifer assumed primary responsibility for navigation and communication. Davidson, despite his previous attitude issues, stepped up to handle most of the physical security requirements. Sarah found herself managing not just the tactical aspects of the mission, but the psychological dynamics of a team operating under extreme stress with a disabled member. She had to maintain mission focus while ensuring that Phillips' injury didn't worsen, coordinate with other teams despite communication difficulties, and adapt to changing tactical situations as they developed. The target area proved to be more heavily defended than the original intelligence had indicated. Sarah's team faced the choice between attempting their original approach despite increased enemy presence, or developing a completely new plan that might be more likely to succeed but would require time they didn't have. Sarah's decision demonstrated the kind of innovative thinking that separated elite candidates from merely competent ones. Instead of choosing between the existing options, she developed a third alternative that combined elements of their original plan with tactical innovations suggested by her team members. The new approach required Jennifer to use her technical expertise to create a diversion that would draw enemy attention away from their target. Marcus would modify their equipment to support a more aggressive assault than originally planned. Davidson would lead the actual capture operation while Sarah coordinated the overall effort and maintained communication with supporting teams. The plan succeeded brilliantly. Jennifer's diversion was perfectly timed and executed, drawing the majority of enemy forces away from the target area. Marcus's equipment modifications allowed them to breach defenses more quickly than anticipated. Davidson's assault was textbook perfect in execution, securing the target without complications. But the most impressive aspect of the operation was Sarah's leadership throughout the complex sequence of events. She had managed multiple simultaneous challenges while maintaining focus on mission objectives, team welfare, and adherence to operational principles. Her performance demonstrated exactly the kind of multi-dimensional excellence that special operations required. The extraction phase of the mission brought one final test that none of the candidates had anticipated. As Sarah's team moved toward their designated pickup point with their captured target, they encountered another team that was in serious trouble. Equipment failures and enemy contact had left 3 candidates injured and unable to reach their own extraction point. Sullivan and his team of evaluators were observing closely to see how Sarah would handle this unexpected situation. The strict parameters of the exercise didn't require her to assist the other team, and doing so would involve significant risk to her own mission success. But the fundamental principles of special operations emphasized that no one was left behind, regardless of unit boundaries or mission priorities. Sarah didn't hesitate. "We're going to extract both teams," she announced to her squad. "Marcus, can you modify our communication setup to coordinate with their team leader?" "Jennifer, plot a route that gets us to their position while maintaining security for our target." "Everyone else, prepare for contact, this is about to get complicated." The combined extraction operation required Sarah to coordinate the movements of 11 personnel, including 3 with injuries, while maintaining custody of their captured target and avoiding enemy forces that were actively searching for all of them. The complexity was beyond anything she had faced in training, but she approached it with the same methodical problem-solving that had carried her through every previous challenge. The operation succeeded, but only because every team member performed flawlessly under extreme pressure. Sarah's leadership was crucial, but it was the collective excellence of both teams that made the impossible mission achievable. When the helicopters finally arrived to extract all personnel, Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond personal achievement. Master Chief Sullivan's final evaluation took place in the same secure facility where the exercise had been briefed 2 days earlier. Sarah and her classmates stood at attention as the man who had tested them beyond what they thought possible prepared to deliver his assessment of their performance. "Over the past months, you have been tested in ways that revealed your character, your capabilities, and your commitment to excellence," Sullivan began. "Some of you have demonstrated that you possess the qualities required for service in special operations. Others have shown that your talents lie elsewhere. Today, I will announce which of you have earned the right to continue to advanced training." The tension in the room was palpable as Sullivan began reading names. Each candidate called forward had successfully completed the most demanding military training program in the world and earned the right to serve among the elite warriors they had dreamed of joining. "Martinez, Sarah," Sullivan announced, and Sarah felt a surge of emotion that she had been holding back for months. She had done it. Despite every obstacle, every doubt, every moment when failure seemed inevitable, she had proven herself worthy of wearing the uniform she had dreamed of since childhood. But Sullivan wasn't finished with his evaluation. As Sarah and the other successful candidates stood before him, he had one final message that would define how they understood their achievement. "You have earned the right to call yourselves Special Operations personnel," he said. "But remember that this graduation is not an ending, it's a beginning. You will spend the rest of your careers proving that today's achievement was deserved. The standards you met here are the minimum standards you must maintain for the rest of your service. Excellence isn't something you achieve once, it's something you must pursue every day. Sarah understood exactly what Sullivan meant. The girl who had once wondered if she belonged among warriors had become a woman who had proven she could lead them. But that achievement brought with it responsibilities and expectations that would define the rest of her life. As she looked at Marcus and Jennifer, who had also successfully completed the program, Sarah realized that their partnership had evolved into something more profound than mutual support. They had become part of a brotherhood and sisterhood that transcended individual achievement, a community of warriors bound together by shared experiences, common values, and mutual commitment to something larger than themselves. The ceremony concluded with the presentation of certificates and insignia that marked their transition from candidates to qualified special operations personnel. Sarah accepted her recognition with pride tempered by humility, knowing that she had earned it through sacrifice, determination, and the support of teammates who had shared every step of her journey. Walking out of the training facility for the final time as a student, Sarah reflected on the transformation that had taken place over the past months. She had discovered capabilities she hadn't known she possessed, developed confidence that was based on proven performance rather than hope, and, most importantly, found her place among the elite warriors she had always admired. The challenges ahead would be different but no less demanding. Real-world operations where the stakes would be measured in lives rather than training scores. Missions that would test every skill she had developed and reveal new areas where growth was needed. Leadership responsibilities that would require her to guide and develop the next generation of special operations personnel. But, as Sarah Martinez prepared to begin the next chapter of her military career, she carried with her something that couldn't be taught or trained, the unshakable knowledge that she belonged exactly where she was. The uniform had been cut with a training knife, marking the end of one journey and the beginning of another. And, when that moment came, she had proven herself ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The instructor who had once questioned whether she had what it took to succeed had been forced to acknowledge that her performance spoke louder than any doubts. The three women who had supported each other through the most demanding training imaginable had all earned their place among the elite. And the young woman who had once stood at the training facility gates with nothing but determination and hope had become someone who would spend her career proving that excellence knew no boundaries.